about 45 years ago was when I first came to Nepal. Anyway, I came to Nepal to go mountain climbing. It was a very macho sport, you know, bag mountain peaks. And anyway, when I got here, I've always been in love with the mountains, and I keep coming back to be in the mountains. And I used to think I could be kind of a mountain climber. I was only sort of an extra mountain climber, the one that does the belaying, not really the one that led the routes. But anyway, I was on some expeditions and met some Sherpas who were, one family in particular, the Sherpa and I got along really well, and he was a Cedar, the head Sherpa who hired all of the local help, Sherpas, porters, yaks, and whatnot. And I made poor attempts at trying to learn the language and really got along well with the locals. And after we got done climbing, I got invited to his home in Namche Bazaar. And he and two of his brothers we'd been together. Anyway, I got there, and their father, who I call a grandfather, old Lama Sherpa, was there, and he said, "Oh, you're just like the rest of the boys. You're one of the family." So they took me in and adopted me, and I've been part of the family ever since. And it's really been a great connection. But after I was here for a few climbs and stuff, maybe a year or so, I got led by my family. Well, one thing, I'd go along, and I kind of, as part of the expedition, I gravitated along and tried to be good friends with the Sherpas and the locals, and so I got the job of keeping track of their pay and you know, the hiring and whatnot along the way, which was through my Sherpa brother. And we'd be trekking along for about a week, and he'd come up to me and he said, we'd be stopped in a village, and he said, "You know, we've been going for a week and we haven't been paid. Do you think we could collect our pay?" And I said, "Well, sure." So we'd calculate out how much was owed, and maybe it was something like, back in those days, it was about 10 rupees, as I recall, to the dollar. And that's about what we were paying these people. And so we might have gone 10 days or something since the last paper time, and so I would give them, say, on the average, $10 that they asked for, or 100 rupees, which I had to admit for me wasn't that much. And then he'd say, "Well, maybe you want to come along with us. There's a Gompa, which is a Tibetan church, and there's a Lama here." And I'd follow them up and watch, and then I'd notice I'd just given them their pay, a week, 10 days worth of pay, and what did they do with it? They turned it all over, they gave it to the Lama, to the church. So I felt a little bit obligated. So I sort of matched it. I came up with my $10. And I said, wow, that's really something. They have this dedication toward the church. But anyway, I've been with them several times like that. And finally, my closest Sherpa brother said, "There's somebody really you should see, a Lama you should see." And he led me to what turned out to be my Sawe Lama, or in English, Root Guru. He was my first major teacher. And when we met, I was kind of shocked because I knew him and he knew me. And he had just escaped from Tibet, from the Chinese occupation, and I had just escaped militaristic America, and we didn't have a common language, but we both knew each other, like you would know your parents or your children. Just instant recognition. And later I felt it could only have come from a previous lifetime. Anyway, we had a long, long discussion, he in Tibetan and me in English. But my Sherpa brother was there, and he studied in the monastery for some years, studied to be a Lama, and was pulled out to help a mountain climbing expedition the British were doing to help Sir Hunt and Sir Edmund Hillary and all that gang. And that's where they got their start mountain climbing. Their father, Palden Lama, pulled them out of the monastery and said, you can go along and help these guys porter. And they portered loads up to the South Col and became the Sherpa Tigers of the Snow. And that was where they got their start. Anyway, back to my story, he introduced me to what I call my root guru. And he changed my whole life. At that point, I think, I didn't know it, I became a Buddhist. So anyway, I'm a monk and a Lama. And I have to tell you, the first vow all of us Buddhists take is, thou shalt not kill. And that's the first main one. And then there's a series of about 10 or so there that are almost identical to the 10 Commandments. And one of them in there that maybe I would have trouble with, there's a couple of them, is speech. And one of them is, thou shalt not lie. So I have trouble because I'm always telling stories. And I've decided it's okay to tell stories. The Buddha told stories of his previous lifetimes. You know, he thought, I don't know where they came from, but he claimed they were from previous experiences. So anyway, now everything I say, I claim is just a story. And just to confuse the issue, I always try and throw a few facts into it, just to confuse things. So anyway, with that background, I'm always telling the trekkers I meet on the trail about high altitude sickness, because I happened to be in Nepal the first year that they flew tourists into the Lukla airport, which is the main jumping off point to go visit Mount Everest, to go up to base camp and the viewpoint at Kalipatar. And supposedly I heard, well, I was there, so I know from experience, there were a large crowd of tourists, and it was the first year over 1,000 tourists went and visited Everest Base Camp. They'd never had that many tourists up there at all. Unfortunately, an awful lot of them got high altitude sickness, and I think I heard 150 died up there, which I don't think that the Nepali government really likes to spread that out, and maybe that's been kept sort of kind of secret. But it was, the local Sherpas didn't understand it, who lived up there. They thought it was a plague that the foreigners brought in with them. And most of the mountain climbers, although they had to experience a little bit of that, most of them had stair-stepped their way up for their climbing. Most of them limited moving their camps to like 300 meters, 300 or 400 meters, 1,000 feet, and they would take them 3 or 4 days to carry their loads up before they finally moved up to the next camp. And so they were acclimatizing, stair-stepping their way up, and rarely got some of them would get serious high-altitude sicknesses after they'd been over 6,000 meters for some long time. There were problems that would occur attributed to high altitude. I myself have never lost consciousness above about 4,500, 5,000 meters, 15,000, 16,000 feet. You're always conscious, and that's not uncommon. And that's kind of debilitating too. But anyway, out of that, all those people that died, the doctors got involved, and it finally was decided they went up too fast. And bragging, I had been up to Everest Base Camp a number of times for different reasons, and something would come up. And I have gone from base camp. Going downhill is okay at high altitude, no problem. But you need to go slowly going uphill. And I have gone from Everest Base Camp to Lukla in 2 days. Gone down, spent the night in Namche, and then the next day I'm in Lukla. And so there are a lot of in-shape mountain climbers who probably I know are much faster than I am and better shape. And they could reverse that, and in 2 days they could be up at base camp. Now, the majority of people live near sea level. And they fly in to Kathmandu, fly to Lukla, and 2 days later they're at 6,000 meters. And the next day they're dead. But anyway, I've been noticing a whole lot of people, they have short vacations, and the tourist people say, oh, you can get up there and get to base camp and back. We'll get you in and out in 10 days or a week. And they're still flying them out in helicopters. Back when that happened, when I was first there, they didn't have cell phones. They didn't have very good communication. And by the time the helicopter got up there, why, all they were doing was taking the bodies out.